Welcome to the Intuition Activation Podcast. This is the place to learn how to reactivate and strengthen your intuitive abilities. I'm your host, Jessica Rachel, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach. Join me as I take a deep dive into the incredible world of spirit and channel their beautiful divine messages along the way. If you're feeling called to connect with your spirit guides, then this is your sign to get started today. Because once you activate your intuition, anything is possible. Have you taken my Which Claire Are You quiz yet? If you've been loving everything that you've been hearing on this podcast so far and are ready to start connecting with your spirit guides, then be sure to head over to my website, jessicarachel.co, and take the quiz. This quiz is designed to help you discover your strongest intuitive ability. You'll also get a few tips on how to start strengthening this gift even more. So head over to my website homepage at jessicarachel.co and take the Which Claire Are You quiz now. I can't wait for you to find out what your strongest intuitive ability is. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Intuition Activation Podcast. I'm your host, Jessica, a spiritual medium and intuitive coach, and I'm so excited that you're here to join me on this intuitive development journey. Now, guys, I'm doing this podcast in a little bit more of an unconventional way today. My plan for today was to record this podcast on the Lionsgate Portal Day. So on August 8th, which it is August 8th today, which is a little last minute for me considering this podcast usually comes out on a Friday and Lionsgate is on Thursday. And unfortunately, that meant that I was trying to squeeze it in between clients and before my husband went to work, and that did not happen. So now I am doing it while I am wearing my baby. In the hopes that he'll stay asleep, and I have my toddler busy with some toys in the other room. So hopefully that will last for enough time for me to get this episode out. Unfortunately, this is an audio podcast only. It is not going to have a video necessarily for YouTube this week, but that's okay. So, guys, my intention for this podcast, and I chose to wait until the 8th to record this, was because we know that the Lionsgate portal, as I shared in last week's episode, is a really big deal in the spiritual world, right? In astrology, there's a lot of things lining up, and the veil is thin if it's there at all. And we're getting a lot of really amazing intuitive downloads for this week from the 26th until the 12th, but the peak of it being on August 8th today. And so I really wanted to do a podcast episode today, and I wanted to check in with my guides on the 8th and ask them what should the podcast episode be. And I really thought that what they were going to say was that the episode should be a channeled message. I should do a divine download and channel from some spirit guide or angel and offer messages for the collective. And I fully anticipated that this episode was going to be like a divine channeled message. And instead, they told me that this episode needs to be a day in the life of a spiritual medium. And that sounded so weird to me. And I kind of questioned my guides and went, "Are you sure? Really? Why?" And then they showed me because this day, this portal is really about manifesting the life that you really want, manifesting your dream life, calling in the vision for your highest self and the way that you want your life to play out. And this life that I am currently living is a life that I only could have dreamed of 5 years ago when I started doing this as a business. And I couldn't have imagined that this is where I would be. But now that I look back, it's exactly what I wanted. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit of what a day in the life of spiritual medium looks like. And I hope it's not disappointing or too mundane of a life. But then I also would love to take you guys back to some of the things, some of the ways in which my guides played a big part in manifesting this life for me. My guides really did give me some very specific advice at really key points in my timeline to make this life happen for us. And so let's start with a typical day in my life. And so I will say that my life is kind of very typical. It kind of looks a lot like a day in the life of possibly what a stay-at-home mom would look like, because technically I do work from home and I am home with 2 very young kids. And so my day typically begins, unfortunately, when my children wake up. I wish I could say I was one of those kind of people who, got up an hour before their kids and did a workout and a meditation and all of the things before my kids got up, filled my cup up before my kids wake up. But unfortunately, that is really not the case. At this season in life, I'm trying to sort of monopolize on as much sleep as I can possibly get. I don't function well when I don't get enough sleep. And that being said, I co-sleep with both of our sons. And when I do get up before they notice pretty quickly when I'm not in the bed. And so I'll maybe get, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes before they realize I'm not there. And so it's not really enough time. And I'm always kind of walking on eggshells, wondering when they're going to realize and freak out that I'm not there. And so usually I just wake up when the kids wake up, which these days is around 7 or 7:30, which is pretty good considering how young they are, and that's when my day will begin. And before I get up, unfortunately, my poor husband, because we co-sleep, before Benny was born, my youngest, we were all in one big family bed, and once Benny was born, there was just not enough room for all 4 of us plus the dog, and so my husband, needing more room and needing more sleep, decided to kind of ban himself or kick himself out to the spare bedroom. And so now he sleeps in the guest room with our dog, and he'll wake up quite a bit before I do. He usually gets up at 5:30 or 6, and he'll go and walk the dog first thing in the morning. He'll go most likely to the gym. He'll have like a whole day before the rest of us get up. And by the time he gets home, we're just waking up, and I will wake up with both the baby and the toddler. Now, some days I get lucky and the baby will wake up before my 2-year-old, in which case I'll take him downstairs and put him on a little play mat. And sometimes I can get a little workout in. Now, this workout is not really what a workout you would imagine typically. I'm only 3 months postpartum, so usually it's just a couple of exercises that my pelvic floor physiotherapist has given me. So it's a little bit more like stretching and, some core exercises to help kind of bring my stomach muscles back together. I'm not even breaking a sweat, to be very honest, but it's necessary. And so I'll do a couple of those exercises if I have the chance to do so. Otherwise, I'll sometimes do that while my older son, is awake and eating breakfast. But either way, we'll do some little bit of movement if I can get it in. And then once my 2-year-old Noah wakes up, we'll grab him, we'll get everybody dressed. And I love to bake, so I will usually bake breakfast in the morning. I have been gluten, dairy, and sugar-free for my entire adult life. We discovered these food sensitivities for me when I was about 12, and so I had to be very inventive and creative about what types of breakfast foods I could have. And, I really find that for me, especially as a spiritual medium, I really need grounding, kind of filling, hearty foods in the morning. I tend to need a lot more carbs than most. For those of you who are, um familiar with Ayurvedic principles, I tend to be very vata, right? Very airy, very heady. And so I need a lot more kind of soothing, grounding foods. And I'm really not one who can have like fresh and raw first thing in the morning. My stomach just can't handle it. So as much as I wish I could be a cool smoothie girl, um, it just doesn't sit well with me in the morning. So I'll usually do some baking in the morning, and I'll make some mini muffins, like blueberry muffins, with oats and bananas and almond milk and, a little bit of maple syrup. Or I'll make some pancakes with pretty much the same ingredients. Sometimes I'll bake an oat flour bread first thing in the morning, but I really do enjoy baking and I love doing it with my son. It's kind of like our little routine. He helps me crack the eggs and pour some things into the blender. And so we'll do that together and kind of cook some breakfast. And then he'll munch on some fruit while we wait for things to bake. And we'll eat that for breakfast. And it's great because then we have like all these mini muffins that we can sort of snack on throughout the day. My husband can take a few to work when he does go to work. So that's really something I really enjoy. I love baking and being inventive about the types of things that I can make that are both gluten free and dairy free and sugar free. So they're healthy, but they're feel a little unhealthy, so that's kind of fun. So we'll usually do that first thing in the morning, and my eldest son, my 2-year-old Noah, really loves doing the baking with me, and he's actually getting pretty good at it. So, it's exciting for me to see, like, I'm maybe this is just me being a biased mom, but I'm pretty impressed by the fact that he's 2 years old and can crack an egg without getting the shell into the blender, so that's pretty fun for me to watch. Um, and so after we do that, we'll sometimes have to go upstairs and get dressed depending on how messy everybody got. And the amazing thing about my life at this point is that the day is so flexible, but also that I love that my husband and I really decided that we both really knew we wanted to work for ourselves because we wanted to be able to make our own schedules. We really wanted to be sure that we had control over our day-to-day life. And so him being a chiropractor, he wanted to work for himself and he now does have his own clinic here in the little city that we have moved to about a year ago. And so that means that he also makes his own hours, which means that most days he actually doesn't even go into his office until sometimes noon and sometimes even later. And so we get to do things as a family together in the middle of the week. And we really love that. And so some mornings I will work with a client first thing in the morning, and then we'll go and do something fun. And some days, because of the time difference, a lot of my clients are 3 hours behind. And so we'll go and have a fun morning, and then I'll come home and work with a client before my husband goes to work. And so, on a day like yesterday, for example, well, no, yesterday's a bad example, but on a day like earlier this week, my husband didn't have to go into work until about noon, and I had a client at 11. So we got up early and we headed off to the beach, which is only 10 minutes away from our house. And we were at the beach from, 8 a.m. until about 10:45. And then we zoomed home. I worked with a client and then my husband went off to work. And so that's really nice that we kind of get to have that time together first thing in the morning. There are some mornings where my husband does work, and those days I don't typically work, or I'll have a nanny come for a couple of hours so that I can get a couple of things done. But usually we get at least 2 or 3 mornings a week where we get to do stuff as a family in the morning before I start to see my clients. And so in the summer, we live by the lake. We live 10 minutes by the lake and all these beautiful little beaches. So we'll usually find a beach and go to the beach, and these beaches have playgrounds. And so we'll spend our morning swimming and playing in the sand. And then in sort of the colder months, we'll either go for a hike, we'll go sledding, we'll do something outside. We really are an outdoorsy kind of a family. And so we love to take advantage of all the nature trails around the city that we live in. So that's usually our morning. And there are a couple of mornings, again, where I said where I do stack up some of my clients as well. There's a couple of days a week where my husband doesn't go until work till a little bit later. So I'll sometimes see a client and then have a coaching client. But the thing that's really I love about sort of the way my day is structured is that I'm never working for more than typically an hour and a half at a time. And at the most, the absolute most will be 3 hours at a time when I'm doing other like administrative stuff or recording a podcast. But I really never work more than 3 hours a day. And typically, I'm only working an hour and a half a day. And that's it. That's my whole workday, 90 minutes. And the rest of my day is really free for me to be home with my kids and to do stuff with my husband and as our little family of 4 or 5, if you count the dog. And that just feels so beautiful and so blissful and so peaceful. And so, yeah, so a typical day, there every day looks a little bit different depending on the time that my husband has to get to his clinic. But like I said, usually we'll spend a morning either at the beach or at the park or doing something outdoors as a family. And we'll rush home. We'll hop home. I'll work with my client for my 90 minutes. My husband will get ready for work and he'll head off to the office. And then I will feed the kids lunch and then they will go down for a nap, an afternoon nap. And guys, I have to be honest, I wish I could say I was one of those productive moms that gets stuff done while her kids are napping. Usually, honestly, I fall asleep with them and I end up taking that 2-hour nap with them. I really enjoy that afternoon nap. I really find that I kind of hit a brick wall at about that time. They usually go down around 1 or 2 o'clock. And usually by then I'm exhausted too. And so we all just cuddle up in bed and have a little nap. And so we do that in the middle of the day. And then after the kids wake up, we'll usually have a late lunch or a second lunch. I find that my toddler doesn't eat much of a lunch before his nap, and he's usually ravenous by the time we wake up at around 4 p.m. And so then we'll usually have a really, big lunch slash dinner at that time. Um, and I should mention that in the morning when I'm doing the baking, I will sometimes get dinner prepped, because I tend to find that if I wait till after the nap, everybody's starving and it's just too hectic. So I'll usually try and prep dinner in the morning, while we're waiting for breakfast to bake, first thing in the morning. And yeah, so then he'll get up, I'll finish the dinner, and we'll have a little kind of dinner slash lunch slash dinner, whatever you want to call it. And then the second half of our day is really me just being a mom. My husband's at work usually until 8:30, 9 p.m. So the evenings are me. And because my 2-year-old naps so late, he doesn't go to bed till kind of later. And so we will just do things. We'll play around the house. Sometimes we'll clean up. Usually our house is a disaster. Sometimes we'll go to the park. We may go grocery shopping. We may, just do activities. We do things at the community center and the library, and we have a lot of neighbors who have kids the same age. And so we'll go outside and play with them. And we're just doing, mom and kid stuff. And that's what we do for the rest of the evening until my toddler is ready to go to sleep. And then I will do dinner, bath, and bed with them on my own. Um, Usually around 8 o'clock, and then, my husband will come home, sometimes when I'm putting them to bed so he can catch them and say goodnight to them before the kids go to sleep. Sometimes I put them to bed myself. And if the boys don't go to sleep too late, which sometimes they do, depending on how long our afternoon nap was, sometimes Noah won't go down until pretty late. But if he does go down earlier, Benny's a really good sleeper. I find he's asleep by 8:30 every night. So usually, if I have a little time, that's when I'll kind of go and have my me time, my grounding time, my alone time. When my husband gets home from work at around 8:39, he'll clean the kitchen, eat his dinner, clean the kitchen, and kinda go to sleep, while I'm putting Noah down to sleep, and so he's asleep too once Noah's asleep. And so then I really get this kind of, like, little 1 hour, sometimes half an hour window to myself before I pass out in the evening, and that's kind of the time that I'll really take to do something that's just for me. And I wish I could say I did it first thing in the morning, but for me, it just feels easier to do it at night when I know everything's done and everyone's asleep. And it really depends on what I do that time. Usually that will involve me going and getting something to eat because I'll have been so hectic throughout the day, I'll have forgotten to eat enough. So usually I'll go and eat something. Um, this will be the time maybe where I connect with my spirit guides. Maybe I'll do some automatic writing. I really love to do self-development courses and take a lot of things I love to learn new things. And so I subscribe to the Mind Valley platform and I'm always taking a course on there. Right now, I'm taking a course about investing and finances. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about investing. So I'll maybe eat some food and watch a couple of those videos to learn how to invest our money. I know, very exciting. But sometimes I do something a little more woo woo, right? I'll be taking like a manifestation course and working on my manifestations, or taking a course on energy healing or something like that. But I really love to always be learning and I love to invest in courses. And so I will usually take that little last hour before I go to sleep to work on one of my courses that I've invested in. And that just really lights me up and makes me feel good. And then usually by then it'll be 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and I'm absolutely exhausted again, and I will pass out and join my 2 boys in the bed, and go to sleep. And so this will be the time maybe where I connect with my spirit guides. Maybe I'll do some automatic writing. I really love to do self-development courses and take a lot of things I love to learn new things. And so I subscribe to the Mind Valley platform, and I'm always taking a course on there. Right now, I'm taking a course about investing and finances. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about investing. So I'll maybe eat some food and watch a couple of those videos to learn how to invest our money. I know, very exciting. But sometimes I do something a little more woo woo, right? I'll be taking like a manifestation course and working on my manifestations, or taking a course on energy healing or something like that. But I really love to always be learning, and I love to invest in courses. And so I will usually take that little last hour before I go to sleep to work on one of my courses that I've invested in. And that just really lights me up and makes me feel good. And then usually by then it'll be 10:30 or 11 o'clock, and I'm absolutely exhausted again, and I will pass out and join my two boys in the bed, and go to sleep. And so that is really our day. I and kind of our everyday, really. I do work on the weekends, but again, I only work for an hour and a half. So, I'll usually put a client kind of later in the day, in the afternoon, late afternoon, usually after the boys have woken up from their or are sleeping for their afternoon nap. So we still have our whole day as a family together. And we've been going to the beach a lot lately because the weather's so nice and we live so close to the lake. That's really our day. We do go to the beach, I would say 3 to 4 times a week, in the summer, and in the winter, we live really close to a bunch of ski hills and beautiful hiking trails, so we do a lot of hiking too, with our boys, and it's really, really fun. The dog loves it too. And that's really our life. That's really a typical day in the life of a spiritual medium. I wish I could be more impressive and say that I have this whole spiritual ritual and, I call in my guides every morning or do sage in Palo Santos. But honestly, at this season in life, I just find that I'm at capacity. I don't have the time, to do it. I definitely did things more like that, prior to having kids. I would go for these long walks out in nature and then come back and do my Palo Santos, and I would have these long meditations, and I would connect to my guides and do automatic writing, and I had this whole long ritual and routine. But once I had kids, that kind of all fell by the wayside, and I find that I connect to my guides a little bit more casually in this season of life. I'm really just allowing them to come through and send me messages throughout the day whenever I have a quiet moment. And then, of course, if I have a really pressing question, I will definitely ask them after the kids have gone to sleep. And that's when my time to sort of connect with my guides. I'll hide away in my office, eat my dinner, watch my courses, and connect with my spirit guides. Um, so that's a typical day in the life for me. And it's really fun. And I love how it's so flexible. I also love that I only work maximum 8 hours a week, and still make a full time income. I make more than twice as much as I made as a teacher when I was working, almost 70 hours a week if you include the tutoring that I did in the evenings as well. And so it's just so crazy to me that, we're here, we made it, and that this is what a day in my life looks like. And the reason that I'm bringing this up, and my guides really wanted me to make this the episode for this week, is because this is a life that I dreamed about. This is a life that I didn't know was possible, but I knew I was going to somehow find a way to make it happen. It was the life that made me keep asking, how do I connect to my spirit guides? How do I connect to my spirit guides so they can tell me how I can craft this life? I knew when I was 25 and I was working as a teacher, and, I was in maybe my second or third year of teaching, going, this cannot be my life. I cannot be working all day long at school, being exhausted, and then going home and working as a tutor all evening just to try and make ends meet. And while I know at that time things were a little bit more of a struggle because my husband was still in school, I just couldn't imagine a life where my whole life was, you know, the schedule was being dictated by somebody else, and I knew I had to work for myself, and my husband did too. And for those of you who are aware of human design, um, both my husband and I are manifesting generators, and we tend to be the type of people who like to be juggling a lot of things, but also we like to have a lot of flexibility. And so the predictability of having to be at school every day, 5 days a week, and then spending my weekend getting ready for the next week ahead just bored me to tears. I couldn't do it. I also have ADHD, diagnosed when I was 6 or 7, right? I'm neurodivergent. I can't sit at a desk for 7 hours or 8 hours a day. and or be inside or in a classroom like that. And so this life really, really suited me so much, suits me so much more than the life that I was living. And in addition to that, when I was 25, I knew that I wanted to have kids. I knew that I wanted to have a big family, and I also really knew deep in my heart that I wanted to be able to be home with them and I wanted to homeschool them. And that didn't seem possible if I was going to be working full time as a teacher. And I really wanted to find a way that I could be home, that I could still earn somewhat of an income and have something that lit me up and fulfilled me, but that I could also be the one who was home, nurturing and loving on and homeschooling my children. And I just needed to make that happen. And so this was what really fueled me to want to connect to my guides even more. I needed them to tell me if I wasn't going to be a teacher, how was I going to work from home? How was I going to have a life that was flexible and that I dreamed of? And I want to rewind a little bit because this Lionsgate portal is really about manifestation as well. It's really about crafting the life that you're dreaming about and using your intuition to help you and connecting to your guides to help you get to that path, to live your most aligned self, your true life, your true path and purpose. And if you can't connect to your spirit guides and get those messages, I highly encourage you to do so because they will lead you on that path. Now, there are a couple of things that were really strategic moves that I made at that time that my spirit guides told me to do. And I never would have gotten to this point if it wasn't for the couple of radical things that my spirit guides told me to do in order to make this happen. So I'm going to rewind to about 5 or 6 years ago. I guess now it was closer to 6 years ago. And so this was when I was in this place of just developing my intuition, right? I knew that I wanted to quit teaching, right? I had had my car accident followed by my ski accident. For those of you who haven't listened to that episode, definitely go back. I believe it's episode 1 of how I went from being a teacher to a spiritual medium. And I was off from work and learning how to develop my intuitive abilities and still wondering if I'm not going to be a teacher, what am I going to do? And it wasn't clear to me at that time that what I was going to do was be a spiritual medium. I all I knew was I wanted to connect to my intuition and connect to my spirit guides to ask them what my stay-at-home job was going to be so that I could be home with my kids and so that I could homeschool them in the future. I didn't think that connecting to my guides was was the thing I was going to be doing for everybody else. I just thought my spirit guides were going to tell me what else it was that I was going to do. And so in that time, my husband and I were renting an apartment, which was really, really expensive. City of Toronto has real estate that is very similar to New York City, very expensive, very high cost of living. And because my husband was a student, I was the solo breadwinner for our family of two. And I was working really, really hard to make ends meet and also working with tutoring students in the evening. So sometimes I wouldn't leave. I would leave the house at 7 in the morning and not come home until 8:30 or 9 p.m. at night just working through the school day and then through the evening tutoring kids in their homes. So really, 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 exhausting time of my life. And so the first thing that my spirit guides told me when I just started connecting to them and I just started to begin to hear messages from them, they had told me that we needed to move into a cheaper apartment. We needed to move into a basement apartment, in fact, that was near the school, the chiropractic college where my husband was going to school so that we could get rid of one of our cars as well. They were telling me we needed to reduce our expenses, reduce them, reduce them, reduce them, so that I could have the flexibility to explore other options for work. And it felt a little crazy. They told me that the next school year I was going to switch to substitute teaching and that we needed to not need as much income as I was making at that point. And this was really radical, to go from a full-time teaching position, which in Toronto, it's really hard to get, right? To get a full-time contract, there are teachers, there are colleagues of mine and kids who I went to teachers college with who are only just now 7 years out of teachers college getting their first full-time contracts. And I got mine right out of school, mostly because I spoke French. And but still, it was a coveted thing and hard to get. So it was unheard of to then turn that down and go into substitute teaching, without kind of knowing that there was a way back in. If you leave, it makes it hard. They make it hard for you to get back in. And so this was really radical. And it was more radical to then go and move into a basement apartment, near the school where my husband was working or learning or studying. And so that's what they told me we were gonna do, and I told my husband, "We need to move into a less expensive apartment. I'm going to have to reduce our expenses because I can't live like this. It's choking me." And so he agreed, and it just so but the one thing that we couldn't seem to find was a basement apartment that was actually any cheaper than the apartment that we were currently renting. They were just as expensive, and so it didn't make any sense to move from an apartment to a basement apartment if it was still gonna cost us just as much. But I listened to that download, and that at that time, I was really obsessed with watching, tiny house tours on YouTube, and I loved watching those. I think I was dreaming of that being the only way we would ever buy a home, at that time. And I remember seeing that somebody had posted or had written, or said on the video that the only way that they had a place to park their tiny house for free was in exchange for taking care of the land that they had parked it on. So, in exchange for tending to the gardens and mowing the lawns and shoveling the driveway, they had a free spot to park their tiny home. And I remember thinking, I wonder if we can do that with a basement apartment. And that day, when that idea came into my mind, it lit me up. It lit up my whole body going, that's how we're going to get an affordable apartment. That day, my husband came home from school and said, one of the fourth years who's graduating, he's leaving his apartment and they need somebody else to rent the basement apartment that's right next to the school. Should we go check it out? I said, yes, absolutely. And so we went to go check it out, and originally that apartment was a very big apartment. It was 3 bedrooms and meant for 3 different students. So the rent was high. It was very high, and it was pretty much what we were paying for our current apartment, so I didn't see the point. And, then I remembered what I had seen earlier that day, and so I told my husband, "Let's ask them if we can, in exchange for lowering the rent, um, if we can mow their lawn and tend to the gardens and shovel the driveway." It was an older couple that was living upstairs who owned the property, and they went for it. They said, "We're actually spending a fortune on a gardener. 100%. If you can cut the grass and rake the leaves and shovel the driveway, we will reduce your rent by half." And that's what they did. They reduced the rent by half, and included utilities except for internet. And we ended up cutting our living expenses in half, just like that, because of a video I had seen on YouTube. And guys, I know this sounds crazy, but I do need to underline this. Your guides talk to you in many ways. Yes, when you channel and you talk to them through your intuitive abilities, they give you messages, right? They told me you need to move into a basement apartment, right? You need to reduce your expenses. But they didn't necessarily tell me in that channeling session how. But then I saw that video that day, my whole body lit up and I went, that's how we're going to do it. Things do not happen like that by accident. They're not coincidences. It's another media, another form of the way that your guides are speaking to you and the way that they're sending you messages to help you along your path. And so that's what happened. We managed to move into this apartment it halved our living expenses and afforded me the possibility to become a substitute teacher and work part-time in order to build up whatever business it was that I was going to build up part-time. Now, again, at that time, I was developing my intuition only for the purpose of asking my guides what my stay at home job was going to be. I didn't know that it was going to be a psychic medium, because if they had told me then at that time that that was going to be my job, I wouldn't have believed them. I needed time to practice and develop my skills and to really truly accept that. And so that's one big piece that happened. And because we were living by the school, we were able to get rid of one of our cars. So that reduced our expenses a lot. And we were feeling so much better. I didn't feel like I had this noose around my neck at that time and on how we were going to get by, even though my husband wasn't making that any very much money at all, because he was in school. And so that was step one. Now, the summer then hit, and I really used that summer to work on connecting with my intuitive abilities. I joined as many Facebook groups as I could find to find other people to practice with, to develop intuitive abilities, and met a few friends who I still speak to today, who I worked on connecting with our guides and channeling for each other. And it was over that summer that I actually started seeing clients, and actually, I had practiced enough on family members and friends and people where I felt confident enough to maybe try and start charging people to be a psychic medium. And at that time, I definitely was, it was nerve wracking for me, but I also felt really like a fish out of water in terms of running my own business. I had only ever wanted to be a teacher and had never been trained in how to run my own business. I had no idea how to make money online or how somebody would, pay me, let alone how to market myself or get the word out there. And that was the problem I was having, is that I didn't know how to get the word out there. I didn't know how to let people know that I was doing this now, that I was connecting with spirit guides for you. And so by that fall, I really was thinking I needed to take some sort of marketing course. Now, again, this is where my spirit guide stepped in. My spirit guide stepped in, and um, they told me that I needed to take the course that was from a podcast that I had listened to, and I had been listening to it for a couple of years. At the time, I believe the podcast was called um, what is it? Don't Keep Your Day Job? I think that's what it was called. Don't Keep Your Day Job by Kathy Heller. She's since changed her podcast name a few times. I don't know if it's called The Kathy Heller Show now, or I think now she talks about manifestation more. So I think now she calls it Abundant Ever After. Either way, Kathy Heller. I had been listening to her podcast on my commutes to work. And it was all about people who had quit their day jobs and in pursuit of usually something a little more artistic, right? Whether it was creating jewelry or t-shirts or, selling things on Etsy, that kind of a thing. But I always found it so inspirational. And then she started interviewing bigger people like Martha Beck and, other big people. And she's become a pretty big podcast and pretty big in the self-development world. But either way, um, I had been listening to her podcast for quite some time, and she started talking about this course that she was going to launch called Made to Do This, and it was meant to help people pretty much muster up the courage to quit their day job, to figure out what it is that they were going to do that was their thing that they could do that was aligned for them, and essentially find their true path and purpose and start their own entrepreneurial business. And she had run that course before, but I had never really thought that it was for me because it was for people who didn't know what they wanted to do. But at that point, I did know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to be a spiritual medium, and so it never occurred to me to take that course. And I believe I was driving in the car one day with nothing on, so just in silence, trying to connect to my guides while driving, which don't really recommend necessarily because kind of affects your concentration, and just asking them, how am I going to market myself? How am I going to market myself? How am I going to market myself? And then I get a phone call from somebody, I can't remember who, but my phone was connected to, the radio in the car or the speakers in the car. And when the phone hung up, it turned on my podcast app for some reason. And it was an ad for this podcast host for Kathy Heller's program. And again, it lit up my whole body. Oh, maybe I need to take this course. Maybe I need to take this program. And at the time, again, we were a little strapped for cash, and it was a really expensive course, especially for me because the price was in US dollars and we're in Canada. So that was like 75% more that I would be paying than an American would. And I remember going, I feel like I need to take this course. And I really sat on it. And then I did go home and meditate that night and ask my guides, was that just a fluke, or am I really supposed to be taking this course? And they kind of said, yes, you're going to need to take it. And I said, well, what about the money? We don't have that kind of cash just lying around. And my guide said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And that night, my husband came home from school and he said to me, Jessica, guess what? And during that time in school, my husband didn't have a job because his schooling was full time. But what he was doing was buying and selling chiropractic tables online. He would buy them at a lower price and fix them up and then sell them for a much bigger price. And that was just sort of like a side hobby. And he would sell them to his friends at the chiropractic college or to the graduating students. He would buy them from sort of retiring chiropractors, fix them up, get them reupholstered, and sell them for a little bit more than he had bought them for. And he came home from school that day and said, Jessica, I just sold 3 tables. That it was like the biggest amount he had ever sold. And he said, and he knew that I was debating taking this course, and he hands me a wad of cash and he says, "Here, go take your course." And I had tears in my eyes. I couldn't believe it because normally when my husband being the more frugal of the two of us, he wouldn't be the one to kind of hand me a wad of cash and say, "Go do it," especially if he didn't deem it necessary. And my guides were like, "We got you. We're gonna take care of you, right? The money will come." And that day, the money came, right? And he had money left over in addition to that, and he just handed me a wad of cash and said, "You know what? Go do it. Take this course. You need to do it. Get your business started." And it was that course that not only did I learn how to market myself, but I met all of my first clients. And the people in the course became my guinea pigs, became the people who started my business. And it was them who then, through word of mouth, shared me with their friends and their friends and their friends. And my business effectively took off from taking that course. And I ended up earning back the money for that course less than halfway through the time it took me to do the course. Um, and so really, really powerful and really magical. So another way in which my guides were so instrumental in connecting me to my path and my purpose. And guys, there were so many other things that happened when I started to pursue the thing that felt like my thing, right? And even little things like me really wanting to manifest a dog. I really wanted a dog and didn't know how to find one. In in 2020 or in 2021 when it was like the height of COVID, and my guides told me how to do that. And really wanting to buy our first house, and that was a whole other story, which I will possibly share in a manifestation episode coming soon. Um, but my guides were really instrumental in telling me things that I didn't even know, and we did some crazy things to make that happen. And so, guys, connecting to your spirit guides can just mean that you manifest the things you want, and it does allow you to sort of see, or to sort of know what are the next right steps you have to take, and your guides will support you along the way. So as you go through this portal, this Lionsgate portal, all I really want you to do is get really, really clear on what it is that you want. What is the feeling you want? What is the thing you're going after? What feels really aligned for you? What lights you up? What's your path? What's your purpose? What's your mission? For me, I didn't even know I wanted to be a spiritual medium. All I knew is that I wanted to have kids and I wanted to be home with them and I wanted to homeschool them. All I knew is that I did want to have some kind of a job to support us, but I didn't want it to take me away from my home. And I didn't know anything beyond that, right? And all I did was start to pursue that, right? And my spirit guides led me the whole rest of the way. They made it all happen. And so this is what I want to share with you is that today when you go and do your automatic writing or when you go and do your journaling, sorry, today this week between now and August 12th, when you go for your walk and ask your guides, I want you to imagine and dream up what do you want your dream day to day to look